2 a.m., no breeze, no fan, just a wet sheet stuck to your skin and a window that won't help at all. That was summer for most of human history. No thermostat, no central air, just people figuring it out, and they did more than survive it. They built entire lifestyles around beating the heat, from porches built just for sleeping, to a man who drove through your neighborhood delivering blocks of ice. Here are 10 ways people stayed cool before air conditioning ever existed, and a few of them work better than you'd think. Before the thermostat, the house did the work. Builders in the 1800s and early 1900s used passive cooling that a lot of modern homes have forgotten. Ceilings were built tall, sometimes 10 or 12 feet, because hot air rises. All that heat just floated up and out of the living space. Windows were tall too and placed on purpose. Put windows on opposite walls of a room and you get a cross breeze, air pulled straight through the house instead of sitting still. Then there's the detail most people miss: transom windows, small hinged windows above the doors. Even with every door shut for privacy, hot air could still escape room to room, keeping the whole house breathing. The house wasn't just shelter, it was doing active work to keep you cool. Today a porch is decoration. Back then, it was survival. A wide covered porch gave families a shaded escape from a house that had turned into an oven by afternoon. And it wasn't just functional, it was the center of the evening. Neighbors gathered there, rocking chairs, glasses of iced tea, conversations that ran until the streetlights came on. Kids played in the yard while adults read the paper in the shade. Dinner sometimes happened right there on the steps. Here's the part most people don't connect. The front porch didn't fade away on its own. It disappeared almost exactly when air conditioning and television arrived. Once the indoors got comfortable and interesting, families quietly went back inside and never really came back out. If the regular porch wasn't enough, some families built an entire room dedicated to one job, helping you sleep through summer: the sleeping porch. Usually screened in, often on the second floor, built specifically for the hottest months of the year. Here's why it existed. Upstairs bedrooms trapped an entire day's heat with nowhere for it to go. So instead of fighting that heat, families just left it behind. Mattresses and pillows dragged out to the porch, screens keeping the mosquitoes out while the night air did its job. This wasn't a fringe idea. It was common practice from the late 1800s all the way through the 1940s. And people didn't just think it was more comfortable, they believed the fresh air circulation actually protected against illness, including tuberculosis, falling asleep to crickets and a breeze instead of a stuffy, sealed room. For a lot of families, that was just what summer nights were. Electric fans showed up in the 1880s, but they didn't become common in homes until the 1920s and 30s. And people quickly figured out a fan alone wasn't enough. Moving hot air around is still hot air, so they engineered around it. The trick: set a block of ice, or a bowl of ice water, right in front of the fan. As the air passed over it, it picked up the cold and carried a fine, chilled mist through the room. A homemade version of air conditioning decades before the real thing existed. There was a second version of the same idea: hang a damp sheet in front of an open window or a running fan. As the water evaporated off the fabric, it pulled heat out of the air passing through. Same principle swamp coolers still used today, just built out of a bedsheet. Before refrigerators became standard in the 1940s and 50s, keeping food cold meant an icebox, and an icebox meant a regular visit from the Iceman. He'd come through the neighborhood with massive blocks of ice hoisted onto his shoulder with iron tongs, delivering straight to people's kitchens. It was a whole industry built entirely around one job: getting ice to families before it melted. But the ice did more than keep food fresh. On brutally hot afternoons, kids would run out to his truck hoping for a chipped-off piece to suck on, the closest thing to a popsicle a lot of them ever got. At home, that same ice went into drinks and straight into the fan trick. One delivery truck, 3 different ways of surviving the heat. And then refrigeration and air conditioning arrived, and an entire daily ritual disappeared almost overnight. In the dry climates of the American Southwest, a different kind of cooling showed up in the 1930s, the evaporative cooler, better known as the swamp cooler. Here's the mechanism. Hot, dry air gets pulled through water-soaked pads. As that water evaporates, it drops the air's temperature dramatically before blowing it into the house. The catch, it only worked in dry air. Useless in humid climates, but in places like Arizona and New Mexico, it was a lifesaver. An affordable mechanical way to cool a home years before refrigerant-based air conditioning became common in the region. Summer clothing had one job: keep you cool, not look a certain way. Cotton, linen, and seersucker were everywhere because they let air move and didn't trap moisture against the skin. Men wore light-colored suits made from these fabrics, and at home it was completely normal to lose the shirt entirely or wear a thin cotton undershirt. Women wore loose, sleeveless cotton dresses. Kids had it easiest. Shorts, a simple sunsuit, bare feet, as little clothing as the day allowed. The idea of tight, heavy fabric like polyester in the middle of summer would have made no sense at all. Without air conditioning, you couldn't just push through the heat of the day. So people didn't try. The hours between noon and 4 p.m. were treated as untouchable. Time for rest in the shadiest part of the house, something close to a siesta. Farmers and outdoor laborers started at dawn, took a long break through the worst of the afternoon, then finished their work once the evening cooled things down. Even housework followed the heat. Baking, canning, ironing, anything that added more warmth to the house, got done early in the morning, before the day turned against you. This wasn't laziness. It was a deliberate survival strategy, built to avoid heat exhaustion in a world with no backup plan. In the 1920s and 30s, something changed in public spaces. Movie theaters and department stores became some of the first places in America to install refrigerated air, and they didn't stay quiet about it. People noticed. On a brutal summer afternoon, going to the movies wasn't really about the film. It was about sitting in a cold, dark room for a few hours and forgetting the heat existed outside. Department stores caught on to the same effect. Window shopping became a summer pastime. Not because everyone needed something, but because the air conditioning was free and the heat outside wasn't going anywhere. For kids especially, beating the heat wasn't a solo activity, it was a neighborhood one. Running through a lawn sprinkler, gathering around an open fire hydrant while it turned a city block into a makeshift water park, swimming in the nearest creek, river, or lake with half the neighborhood. None of it required technology. Just shared space and shared heat. Popsicles melting faster than anyone could finish them, lemonade stands showing up on random corners, small collective ways of turning a miserable afternoon into something people actually looked forward to.